Welcome to another episode of In the Nude. Today let's talk about embracing what is. We're here in this journey of trying to heal, unpack, drop off coping mechanisms. And we find that we repeat cycles. We find that we have chaos. We have patterns we don't like. And sometimes it can feel like you're making the exact same mistake. I want to encourage you, separately from what we're going to get into today, that you're never actually repeating the exact same mistake, because in each scenario, you're slightly different and the scenario is slightly different. And so it might be patterns that are closely linked, but they're not actually all the same. And each one, you take away something different and you are changed in it. And therefore, it's not exactly the same. It's a whole side nugget, but it's the embracing of what is. What do I mean? We have a lot of shoulds. Woulds, woulda, coulda. You can look at your childhood and be like, I should have had parents who fill in the blank. A spouse that fill in the blank. These dreams, these dreams for the future of what we wish was, or looking at the past and wishing what could have been or should have been. But neither of those are actually helping you get what you want. Both of them are not being present in the moment. Looking back or looking forward, but not being with what is. There's this analogy I heard once about a mess. So I always refer to it like a beverage, right? Like you have a beverage and it's spilled. And no matter how much you're like, if I had put the lid on, I wouldn't have spilled my beverage, because if I just bumped it, it wouldn't have gone everywhere, right? Or if I hadn't been rushing, I wouldn't have hit that person, and my elbow wouldn't have hit that person, I would have spilled my coffee. If I just hadn't been rushing, I shouldn't have been rushing. Or you shouldn't have been standing there, right? None of that changes what happened. Like right in front of us is this cup of, say, coffee we really wanted to drink, and now 90% of it's on the floor. And it's in a carpet, right? So it's going to be a terrible, smelly mess just sitting there. Nothing about what we wanted to happen, wish could happen, thought should have happened, changes what is. We can have reflections on how frustrating it is because maybe somebody shoved you and it's nothing to do with you, but there's still, your coffee is no longer in its cup. There's this moment that when we want something to look different, we have to stop looking back, looking forward, and just embrace what is. And it's uncomfortable. My coffee is spilled. My coffee is spilled. And it is from that acceptance of what is that we can do something with it, right? Whether it's, we say, fork it, drop the rest of the cup and walk away, or we bend down and try to sop up the mess and then clean the carpet. And then we try to stand up and set a boundary with the other person at that point. You get the idea. It's only from accepting what is that we get the end we want. Do we go get ourselves another coffee? Do we say, never mind, this was the universe's signal that I don't need to have coffee right now? Or, you know what I mean? It's this, there's power in the owning of what is. It doesn't mean it was your fault, right? Somebody could have totally pushed you. That person could have jammed their elbow out. But no matter what the other person did that you can't control, and no matter how unfair that was, that happened to you, the coffee was spilled, right? And the ownership of leaning into this, what is, the ownership of forget it. Forget what I can't control. Back away from the wishing and the daydreaming of these possibilities of what I deserve. And then the ownership of, I'm going to start showing up with what I deserve today. I'm going to start showing up as that person that I should have had in my life. And part of that ownership that can, something that can make it easier to go with, okay, what is? I'm loving myself today, what is? It's being willing to be with yourself and realize that you don't need to be like somebody else. And you don't need to be a better version of you. This thought process on comparing yourself, oh my gosh, you're so amazing, yourself to another person. It's defeating to that person, and it's denigrating to that person as well as you. Better you? What are you comparing to? It isn't that you need to become a better you, unless you mean you need to become more you. Those things that you don't really like about yourself, I bet you money most of them are ways that you dealt with surviving. Coping mechanisms. Tendencies to adjust yourself and how you handle a situation to maintain safety or response to unsafety. So you want to be the best, be the most you. The best you is the most you, the most embodied you, the most you. It's letting go of the comparison. It's letting go of there's like some type of end in sight for this like goal, like it's some type of race, and at the end of it, what happens at the end of a race? A racer, what happens at the end of a race? They celebrate, they cheer, and they pick out their next race. What happens at the end of a hike? The person experienced the hike, it's so fantastic, and you know what happens? They loved the experience of the hike, generally speaking, but let's just say it was for they did, Everest, right? And it's for I checked off Everest. That person, when they get to Everest and they finished it, do you think all of a sudden they're like, yes, I have arrived. I've done all of it. I am the man. No, at the end of it, you know what they say? What's the next thing? Because it's human nature. There isn't this arrival point. There isn't this over there. So if we can stop and let go of this over there, like that thing, that being, that result, that experience is going to change me. And we instead embrace this moment of life and the full spectrum. We're taught that there are good emotions, quote, good. And then there are bad, quote, bad emotions. You cannot know stress if you have not experienced peace. You cannot experience amazing enjoyment and engaged fun if you haven't fully embraced it, if you haven't also experienced boredom. You can't get creativity without boredom. It is within space and time to exist that people develop and invest in cultivating curiosity and imagination. We have this stigma on being depressed. We have this stigma on anger. Your feelings are not some negative thing. They're a beautiful spectrum of feeling that allows you to fully experience life, and not just experience it and passively do it, but when you're in the moment and allowing it, thriving in the experience of it. When you're angry, it is a shouting from inside of yourself how much you love yourself, because anger is a protective secondary feeling. It comes after usually hurt, where something endangered your heart or your body. There's some level of endangerment, and then your body says, no, I will not receive that. And anger comes out to play because it's saying, I love this person and you're not allowed. Hurt, oh, it's not fun, but it shows you that you had the capability of feeling it. In a world where you can have sadness and the most deepest, wrenching sadness, whatever level of pain and sadness you've experienced, you have the capability, capacity, you've been stretched to the full spectrum of the feeling, which includes that happiness and joy and elation on the other end. It isn't that one side is bad, it is an entire experience altogether, and it doesn't always feel nice. Emotion being not bad doesn't make it feel great. But if we have the mentality going into our life experience, that it is continuously like a ball rolling down a hill, right? Is there a start to the ball? Is there a clear indication of where it renews? Or is it a continuous rotation, up and down, up and down? What if we started viewing a life, instead of being so like just mad and sad when something comes to a close. If we start identifying when things stop and they have a renewing start. What if every ending in our life, every closed door is an open window? That old saying. But what if we actually did it, right? What if you spent a day thinking about how your life in a day has things that stop and start? For the end of one thing, it starts another, right? You wake up in the morning. That was the end of your sleeping, and you're waking to a new day. And your day is usually parsed up into different sections, right? I don't know what your work looks like or your life looks like, but it is going to have sections. For example, you sit down and you eat. That is the end of whatever you're doing before it and the start of eating. When you finish eating, that is the end of eating and the starting of another. In that same sense of if you take the time and for a day you think about how things start and how things have stopped and then they start, and you start viewing things that way, it allows this like freedom in not needing to get over your feeling. You lost someone you love, whether having the ability to relate to them or them passing or the end of a relationship or whatever. You don't have to get over it. You don't have to just all of a sudden be happy. You don't have to pretend, but you can know that that end of that, as heartbreaking as it is, has given you an opening that you don't know what that next thing is going to be. But you didn't know what that thing that just ended, when it started, you didn't know what that would look like and what it developed into, what it taught you during the experience of it. There's something new that this is making space for. And it doesn't feel great, the making space. But it doesn't make it any less beautiful. Fall is a beautiful physical reminder of this. I love fall for a lot of reasons, and I am so basic that a lot of them are the ones you can automatically come off the top of your head. But the main reason I love it is because I needed the visual reminder that death can be beautiful, that the end of something can be something that people celebrate and travel to go see the beautiful sights of something dying. I live in North Carolina, and people travel to the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina in October to watch leaves die because it's so beautiful. What if we came to the table of our life with that energy? What if instead of just seeing it as something that we lost and we're so sad at, that we can hold space for both emotions and see how beautiful that life was, and we can make space to be sad at its ending, but also see the beauty in its opportunity for change, for something new, for new life. It also makes it, for me, feel less permanent. It makes it, for me, feel less like I'm drowning in it. My marriage ended, and I didn't want it to. I had this picture and a fairy tale. It wasn't truth, but I had it, and it was mine. It was in my head, and I thought it was real. And facing that end, heartbreaking. But you know what I got new on the other side? A beautiful co-parenting relationship. I was able to put aside the hurts and the scars, and we were able to build a fantastic co-parenting relationship where we put our kids' relationship to our family first. That isn't the case for a lot of people, and I understand that. So I'm not talking about all the general people, and I'm not trying to dismiss the experiences that people go through. I'm trying to give a tangible example of how this practical thought process has helped me. I still have time frames where I have fantasies in my head about that fantasy I told myself for so long. But I ground myself in the reality of the beautiful starting that I was offered in this. That I was able to cultivate this co-parenting relationship, and that's beautiful. And it also allowed me to step into being willing to face the demons in the mirror. Being willing to not walk away from the things that I saw that were ugly there. To try to drop away the coping mechanisms and the lashing for control and the anxiety as a result of it. I hold up my hands because I still struggle with picking my fingers, right? But it's this cycle of seeing a close and end as this new opportunity, this new beginning, and it giving you, if you embrace that thought process, that cycle, there's catharsis in knowing that it'll pass. It helps me not get so attached. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I think attachment is wonderful, but I mean, it helps me not get so attached to things. When I was a little kid, I was a little psycho, right? We moved a lot. There was a lot of trauma, all of that. But there was this refrigerator. It was almost pink in color, right? We moved so many times, like so many times. And one time I came home from playing outside and the refrigerator was gone. I was 7, 6, somewhere in there. And I couldn't handle it. I had a very weird and unhealthy relationship with food. It was one of the ways that I escaped and like took control of my life. We didn't get to have excessive amounts of food, but I loved food, and food was like I was constantly, I had food scarcity, right? So I loved this refrigerator, and not that I had shared that with anybody, but it was gone when I came home, and it was because my parents got a new one, and that's totally fair and reasonable. But I had this deep-seated attachment to something that didn't actually matter and didn't actually have anything to offer back, right? But it was my way, my brain's way of dealing with change and needing for control and something that seemed stable, because while it couldn't give me something back, it couldn't take anything either. It couldn't ask anything of me, it just was. And that was the best relationship I could find at the time. And then it was gone. And as a kid, that was really big. It sounds so silly. It sounds so silly now, but it was so big for me in that moment. And as a kid, I decided that that was the last time I would try to have a relationship with anybody or anything. Obviously, that didn't stay. And while my takeaway from that was not a healthy extreme to go to, there was a nugget of wisdom in there. My trying to grasp onto something that I could never gain control in a chaotic growing up, I gained myself more heartache. And when I decided to let go of relationships to things and being attached to things, I was freed from a very young age from keeping up with the Joneses and all of that. I was poor already, so I already knew I didn't have it, but I had this like longing to fit in and longing to fit the standards that I saw other people having and the cool shoes. But from that moment on, that one aspect of letting go of that connection, it freed me from that being a struggle. I own a Ford Transit van, right? A passenger van. And I do not care one bit. I don't have a desire to have a different car. It starts every time. Its heating and air works. Fantastic. Need nothing else in a car. And I've had that vibe towards things since that age. And that is a beautiful gift for me. I view it as a beautiful gift all my life, because I don't feel the need to constantly take in and like achieve these things. I still have that desire to achieve worth in other ways, not with things though. But it's a long story that probably is convoluted, but it gets the point is simply, if we can loosen our grip on the things that we think that we have to have, and we loosen our grip on like the death grasp that we can get on when something is dying and we're trying to like that. Have you ever been in a relationship where there's like, you can see that it's coming to a close and you're not super invested emotionally, so it's not like this, it's just a understood, okay, like you were work friends, right? And then one of or the other of you like quits working in the place, and you realize, I really don't care about putting in the effort and energy to maintain this relationship now that we've changed jobs. It was just because of convenience and them being there, right? But maybe it's not equal, right? Maybe I feel that way, but then the other person really thought it was more than that. And so they start like grasping it, trying to control and like force the relationship. Have you ever been in that situation where you kind of feel like, oh God, it's a cling vibe? right? Or where you've been in a relationship with somebody and you've been bending over backwards and you finally just get done, and then they realize you're done, and then they're trying to like backpedal and like do anything, and you're like, where was this energy like 2 years ago, right? We get that way with these things in our life. We get this like clingy, trying to hold on to it while it's disintegrating from our fingers at the same time. If we can embrace the idea that it doesn't have to be this like catastrophic moment when something ends, but it can be a celebration of what was and an acknowledgement of what will be, while also holding space for the fact we can be sad about it. This like trying to view things in this cycle, in this spectrum of feelings, and not having to denigrate myself for sadness or hurt or anger, but also leaving space for me to process where I am and to just exist, and that I can have more than one feeling. I can both be sad at this end, but excited about where I'm growing or what's new. We're taught to live in boxes. Girls do this, boys do that. Good parents or good children, or we have these, like, there's these painted boxes, these fences that are built by the words of those around us. In school, in our families, if you're part of religious organizations or clubs or like sports, they have these fences they put up. Some fences are great, other fences are not so great. But we have these fences, and we spend so much time being caged in these fences, when maybe the fence should have just been a vague understanding. What if we shifted from having to feel like we had to fit within these constraints of very binary rule sets, and we instead just put on a filter to view life? I'll give my religious upbringing as an example. I was raised fundamental, okay? What does that mean? There's a lot of people who are telling you what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong. There's lots of this like bounds and rules and structures, and this pointing here and pointing there. Don't do this, do this. And as a result of all of these things, you feel like you're hopscotching inside of a tiny box while trying to be human. And there's not a lot of space. There's speaking of grace, but not a lot of space for actually living out life and being human, right? And that when you have all those things and you're being human and you fail, guess what happens? Because you're just being human, so you're going to fail. You have this shame, this denigration, this like less than mentality on yourself. You start beating yourself up, and you're standing in all this shade, and then you look out in the world. You have this rigidity and this bound structure with each of these rules that's closing in on you as you stand in the shade and you look out and you see other people who aren't in the shade. They're not living by these bound structures. Why aren't they living by these bound structures? That's not fair. Look at them. I can judge them. And you start throwing shade. I'm better than they are. Because you need to step on their back to feel like you might be able to see the light through all the shade that you've been throwing, through all the shade that you've been owning and pulling into yourself, right? What if those people who were raised that way, like I was raised, with all of these structures and bounds, where do they come from, right? These rules, these don'ts and these do's, they all come from the Bible, right? Well, the Bible's culminative thing is it's supposed to be Jesus, right? All of it's leading to Jesus. So then why is not Jesus' words prioritized about everything else? Why is that not the focus? What did he say all of the rules come down to? Two things: love God and love people. What if those words that he said, God said, the culmination, what if it shattered all of those bounds and all of those fences and all of that bounding and restrictions they had, and they let go of the tiny, tiny little box that they lived their world in and shaming themselves, and they instead put on the filter of love? They didn't have to know whether the thing was right or wrong. They asked the question, is this loving to God? Is this loving to people, and I'm people too? Is this loving to God? Is this loving to people, and I'm people too? What if they just saw the world through that filter, those glasses they put on? They don't have to have these bounds and structures for every tiny little thing because they can just come to the table seeing this filter. Even if you were raised religious, you've experienced these bounds and structures too. Maybe you were in school and you got told what a good student was and you knew you didn't fit that. And so you were put in this box of bad student or stupid. I don't know what your boxes are. I don't know what your structures are, but you have them. Everybody does. They walk around and you can see them being bristled because you can see when they start judging other people and they're throwing shade and saying passive comments. If you ever see a bully in comments, just think how deeply that person is troubled within themselves to be doing that to a random stranger on the internet. They are so bound within their fence and so unwilling to be flexible to get out of it, to let it go. What if we stopped being bound by these tiny structures, these tiny fences we've built up because other people gave them to us? Other people who were still living in their fences and giving their fence and their baggage and their all of that to us. What if we dropped to the side and put on a filter of our own? What if we got to experience the whole yard, the whole space, the whole spectrum of feeling? What if we allowed ourselves the ability to both mourn the loss and death of something and also celebrate the fact we have something new? What if we are allowed ourselves to see the thing as a cycle, as something ending and beginning all of the time? What if we allowed ourselves the space to feel all of it and not be mad at ourselves? What if we allowed ourselves to treat ourselves instead of how we have been, which is how we were treated by them? What if we came to the table with the love and grace and compassion that we always wished we had? What if we started treating ourselves when we failed instead of with, well, you should have, and anger and frustration at lack of perfection because that's how we were given. We were told, fit the box, fit the thing. What if we instead came to the table with grace? Allowed ourselves to have all of the feelings, not be shaded on any particular one. What if we did? What would our life look like?